8:30 on the dot. You know what time it is. Another episode of the Total BS podcast. Justin, what's cracking?
Man, it's kind of bittersweet. Okay. I'm a little sad, but I'm really excited. I'm sad because this weekend was the last live episodes of The Last Dance, but I'm also excited because in this episode of the Total BS podcast, we are doing a Last Dance Palooza. We have a lot of guests to talk with, and we're going to talk all Last Dance in the Total BS podcast. Let's get it.
For sure. Let's get into it.
Your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just part of the program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You're not whack, you just sound whack rapping after us. Yo, your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just a part of this program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You not whack, you just sound whack rapping after us.
Right there by MC Squared. There we go. We ran it last week. I love it. It's one of my favorites that we've ever tried to create or put together. So, hey, tell the people where they can find us, Justin.
Hey, the Total BS podcast is everywhere. We are on YouTube. So if you want to get the full production, you want to watch the whole show, watch our clips, watch our interviews and our guests, then you need to check us out on YouTube. We're also on Facebook Live, but be sure to subscribe to the Total BS podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are everywhere, my man.
And also, we got a little bit of breaking news. Justin and I had a little discussion today, and we decided that we are going to drop a podcast every Wednesday as well. Just a podcast, no live stream or video or anything like that. So it gives you an opportunity to not have to sit here and watch us, once a week, which is kind of nice, I think, for some people.
Mm-hmm. But, during these times, you're going to be home a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of different activities. Let us talk you through it. Let us be, the voices that talk about sports and pop culture while you go through the day-to-day activities during the quarantine period. So hey, I'm excited to add another episode.
At least here in Arizona, the gyms are opening back up. So, maybe you can just throw on it while you do your little run or workout. I guarantee you don't want workout advice from myself or Justin. So
no,
we won't
definitely not. Definitely not.
The Last Dance came to an end tonight. There's a mixed bag of feelings within myself. I know you were very much looking forward to this series, and now it's come to an end. Your general thoughts on the last two episodes without going into too much detail.
Man, first of all, I didn't know Michael Jordan was nicknamed Black Jesus. This is something that I learned watching episode 9 when him and Reggie Miller were going back and forth, and Michael Jordan told Reggie Miller, "Don't talk trash to Black Jesus. You just don't do that." To see that exchange with Reggie Miller and Michael Jordan, I thought was so great. And honestly, I thought my favorite part, and Saul, this, us being out here in Arizona, we have a special place in our heart for a guy like Steve Kerr. Yeah. And for them to really give him some screen time and go into the background of Steve Kerr and how his father was assassinated, it really goes to show why Steve Kerr is who he is today, why he's one of the more outspoken coaches in the NBA today, whether it comes to things going on inside the game or in the political world, which I thought was really awesome to see in The Last Dance. But for that part, and then to see everything all wrap up, the whole Michael Jordan era come to an end, it was just such a great time to sit down and watch this. And Saul, I know watching it live and watching it during this podcast, I'm sure it brought back a lot of memories to you.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I think one of the things that I know we'll get into here in the next hour, as Corey Williams and Jabari Davis and Paige will talk about with us, is just the fact that I wish they would have spoken more about Ron Harper.
Really
Ron Harper he had a vital role on that second three-peat, and the fact that that they just didn't talk much about him outside of like the very first few episodes when he had talked about guarding Jordan when he played for the Cavs. I was kind of surprised they kind of just shoved Ron Harper to the side and that was that, because as far as role players goes, he was just as vital as Steve Kerr, if not more, because of the defense and the ability to bring the ball up the court. As you could see, I mean, that team was wearing down. towards the end, and they needed every little bit of help they could get just to get over the hump. And I was kind of surprised that they didn't do that.
Also, how tall is Ron Harper, by the way?
I want to say he's about 6'5", 6'4", maybe even 6'6".
Which I thought was beneficial for the Bulls against the Utah Jazz, because you have that big body against John Stockton, which really helped them out in that series. But man, just to see those battles, I thought was so great. And can we just talk about how great those Utah Jazz uniforms were back in that day?
You mean trash? How trash those uniforms were?
Those uniforms are amazing with the mountains, and it's purple uniforms, unlike any other team.
Yeah, well, yeah, I thought it was a good way to wrap it up. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of the after, like what for those. I like how they took us from like the known to the unknown. Everybody knows what happened in '98 and that the Bulls won 6 championships and all that stuff. And I liked how they took us to the unknown. A lot of people don't know about 84, 85, 86 and the rise of Michael Jordan and how great he really was and the obstacles he had to go through. I like how they did that. I wish they would have done the same moving forward, because I think people just forget what had happened. They forget that Pippen went to the Trailblazers. They forget he ended up even going to the Rockets with Barkley, and they thought they were going to win a championship. Then they got upset. It's just a lot of different moving parts all over the place. I really wish they would have gone into that a little bit more. Where Steve Kerr ended up going. I mean, hell, Steve Kerr almost single-handedly won the Spurs a championship when they got to the Western Conference Finals against the Dallas Mavericks by hitting like 5 threes and really saving that series for them. It's just a lot of moving parts that I really wish they would have put together at the end. But that being said, this was probably one of the all-time great sports documentaries I've ever watched. Yeah. I know When We Were Kings, which is a Muhammad Ali documentary, is probably my favorite of all time. But this one ranks right up there.
Yeah, I also think, too, I give the producers and everybody involved in this documentary the benefit of the doubt here, because ESPN released this before they were actually supposed to release it. Remember, the original release date was set in June, and then you get Richard Jefferson and LeBron and everybody in the NBA community sitting there's like, hey, you need to release this right now. There are no live sports going on in the world right now. We need this documentary. So they said, you know what? Christmas came early. Here's this documentary. We still need to finish the last couple of parts, but we're going to go ahead and release it anyway. So I give the ending and how they kind of, briefly said in little bullet points, like this is what they did afterwards. I thought it was a nice way to wrap it up, but I totally get your point, Saul. But another thing that I was really intrigued by when I watched this was how they explained the flu game, because this was the big question that I had going into tonight's episodes was how much in detail were they going to explain the flu game, and how they explained it. They were looking for a bite to eat in Salt Lake City. Saul, you and I have worked in Salt Lake City before. Everything closes down at 9 o'clock. A Burger King closed down at 9:30.
That place is the worst place in the country to get stuck, period. The fact that Michael Jordan couldn't find a pizza after like 8 o'clock at night, of course he couldn't. Do you know where you're at? This is the most ridiculous thing in the history of civilization, that places shut down at 8 o'clock at night. I hate Salt Lake City so damn much. I don't know if anybody watching from Salt Lake City, I don't care. I hate your city, period. It's the worst place on earth.
Oh, man. Oh, Salt Lake City. Man, bless the SLC. But
people from Salt Lake City are probably just saying, oh, well, you're a sinner. That's why. Well, whatever.
But going back to the pizza. So Michael Jordan finds this pizza, and then his trainer opens up the door, and there's 5 guys delivering the pizza. And he said in the documentary that was a little suspicious. The fact that the pizza company sent out 5 guys to deliver one pizza to one Michael Jordan. So why, if you were so suspicious, why do you give Michael Jordan the pizza? And, I was sat there and thought about it. So I want to get your take on this. There aren't any food options in Salt Lake City. So maybe they thought that was the only option they had. Okay. You either eat the suspicious pizza and risk possibly getting sick, or you don't eat and then you're just hungry and what's going to happen to you afterwards. So So but if you're Michael Jordan, you can find any food anywhere, wherever you are at. So that's why I found that kind of suspicious that it turned into the food poisoning game instead of the flu game.
Danielle Fork likes my comment about Salt Lake City because she knows how
knows
awful that place. Actually, she does not know, actually, because she skipped out on that trip and just met us in San Jose the next weekend for the tournament. Whatever, Danielle. We see you. So as we're waiting for one more guest to show up, we got our roundtable in the bullpen ready to come out. But before we get to that, one last little nugget about this series, and you mentioned it earlier with Steve Kerr. It was my absolute favorite part of this two-part finale. And Steve Kerr, I mean, for those of you who don't know, obviously Justin and I are really close to the University of Arizona. It's close to our hearts. But Steve Kerr, I met him one time back in 1993, actually with one of our guests that's on today, Corey Williams. I actually met both these gentlemen doing a Sporting Chance basketball tournament way back in the day. And Corey was actually coming through. And I just knew that he played for the U of A basketball team. I was like, oh, it's Corey Williams. And then they had shut a tarp off. This is the old Bear Down gym. And there's like, if for those of you who don't know, if you ever watch Revenge of the Nerds, when they all get stuck in the gym, that was Bear Down Gym. And Steve Kerr was all the way up on the other side of the court because he was going to hand out championship trophies. And that was the first time I ever got to meet Steve Kerr. And I went over there on that side and I looked at him and he was just doing a shooting workout and he had no shirt on. You know, he's like, I think at this time, maybe like 25, 26 years old. And he's just draining three after three after three. And I shared a few words with him and I was just like, I was marveled at his size. He was not a big guy, very tiny. He seemed like he was maybe 100 pounds. But could just shoot the lights out. And he was like the nicest dude you could ever meet. And what you see with Steve Kerr in real life on TV is really what you get because he's just as genuine a person as you could hope to meet. But with that being said, we got a roundtable to get to, right?
I'm excited.
We
have some interesting guests to talk to.
We do. So I'm going to introduce these guys and ladies. We're going to do this Chicago style kind of, you know, I don't have the music, but I wish I did. But, first we got a man who comes to us, a longtime NBA writer and the host of the Dunks and Discourse podcast. My man, Jabari Davis is in the house. What's up, Jabari?
Hey, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. And next up, we have from ESPN, a longtime friend of both of ours, Justin, college basketball insider or whatever you want to call him. He's one of the best analysts out there in the country. Final Four participant. I'm going to just keep hyping him up because I can see him off screen kind of like rolling his eyes. Mr. Corey Williams from ESPN is joining us. What's up, Corey?
What's happening? How you doing?
Good. And then finally, the COO of the Draft Network, a long-time Chicago, I'm going to say diehard. I think she's a native, but I just know that she loves all things Chicago. Miss Paige Dimakos is here. How you doing, Paige?
What's up, guys? I am a Chicago native. I don't live there anymore, but I grew up there, born and raised. So now I got smarter and moved to the warm weather, and now I live in Scottsdale.
There you go. Corey Williams is also a Chicago native as well. So we got a lot of Chicagoans in the house, and we're going to start this roundtable off right. First of all, let's start with you, Paige. What was your first impression once the end credits hit of the entire documentary as a whole?
It's rare in sports and entertainment when something has so much hype that it lives up to the hype, right? I think about movies, television shows, finales, things that happen. I think most recently Game of Thrones and how many people were disappointed in how the last season ended. This was everything that I expected it to be and more. And that's coming from somebody who's watched all the games, seen all the series, grew up around this team, like made a sign that, talk smack to Karl Malone when I was a little kid. These were things that I grew up around, and to relive it and watch it the way that it was. And, good luck making a documentary after this. That's all I have to say. Because man, oh man, this was, and on top of that, I think as sports fans, we're all kind of hardwired to sit with each other and watch sports together. And because we haven't been able to do that in a while, it's just felt really good on Sundays to hop on Twitter and be talking sports with all my friends. And I think that's added a collective layer of just kind of added bonus to this whole thing. So I was blown away, and I was expected to be excited, but not leave the way that I am. So it was everything I hoped for and more.
Awesome. Corey, you lived it, man. I mean, you were there in the rise of Michael. I'm sure he had a little bit of inspiration to your game as you were coming up as a young man at Batavia High School out in Illinois. What was your experience like watching this documentary as a whole, especially the early parts that you remember kind of watching in real life?
Well, that was for me the key. It was like, I remember watching WGN. I remember watching Bulls games, like all the games, not just the ones that made, the national games on the weekends. I was watching all the games all the time. I remember when Jordan got drafted, we were playing pickup ball. And they're like, oh, my God, the Bulls just drafted Michael Jordan. And, like, everybody just started jumping up and down. We were, like, super excited because when you lived in Chicago, the Bulls were your identity as a person. Like, you could play basketball, and if that was your team, as far as the back and forth on the playgrounds, it's like, yo, I'm from the Chicago area, Chicago Bulls all day long. And, of course, you had the Pistons, you're the Celtics, you're the Lakers, you're all these great teams. But he literally gave that entire area a sense of pride, and that's what I remember as a kid. I was born in 74, so I'm 10, 11 years old, just falling in love with basketball when we draft Jordan. So, long before you were yelling out Kobe on your fadeaway, you were yelling out Jordan on game point down at the park.
That was just Justin. Let's be clear about that. Probably Justin and Jabari for sure.
And that's the other thing I was thinking when I'm watching the documentary is like, I hope my nephews are watching so we can kill this GOAT debate because
Thank you very much. Thank you, Corey.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here's the thing. Basketball is a fraternity, and it's a massive fraternity. And I think a lot of people, I don't fault the Kobe and LeBron fans because they're looking at a 10 or 15-year history of the game. That's all their lifespan has allowed them to see. They sit down with someone like me, and I'm not ashamed to say, I've been watching basketball for almost 35, 40 years. I've got friends that have been watching it for 50 or 60. So it's kind of like taking a college class with somebody who's only done 100-level courses. And they're sitting there telling you about the history of the United States beginning in 1900. You're like, oh, hold on.
I'm going to use this, Corey. This is fantastic.
Yes.
So tonight, when you sit down with your fellow basketball colleagues, you say, did you see the level 200 course on Jordan? the Sunday night documentary that brought you up to speed on a bigger picture of why our generation looks the way we look at it. Yes, I thought it was well done. Well done.
Jabari, you and I, we're both diehard Laker fans. So I know you loving Showtime, you kind of hated Michael Jordan growing up.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I'm going to be the polar opposite of these guys. But the thing about Jordan that was so incredible is I hated him straight up. I hated watching him, except for when he played Utah. Hated watching him, hated everything about him. But it was absolutely hating. Like you were scared of him. You knew what was coming back. Whether it was he was going to get you by halftime or get you by the end of the third or get you at the end of the game, you knew he was going to get you. So for me personally, even though I hated him at the time, I loved this doc because it allowed me to kind of step outside of all of that juvenile hate at the time and then recognize, man, this guy really was the greatest thing to ever pick up one of these things. Now, no disrespect to Kareem or anybody else's GOAT. For me, even though I love Kobe and he may be alongside Magic and Cap my favorite to do it, Mike's the GOAT. So it was just great to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unfold here, and we can't get to everything in the next 20 minutes. But there was a lot of high points. Dennis Rodman, in the series was a very high point. Jordan's competitiveness, obviously, especially at the end of 7, how he just wrapped up episode 7. For you guys, what were some of the high points for you? Let's start with you, Corey.
Just one of the high points for me was listening and seeing how he was as a person. I think a lot of times he was scared about when this aired, he was going to be viewed as a bad guy. The language, the way he talked to his guys. And I think at the same time, you heard out of their mouths how uncomfortable they were, but in the same breath, how he was responsible for their success. I don't think Belichick is the friendliest guy in the world, but look at his jewelry. Jordan, probably not somebody you'd want to go on vacation with. Look at his jewelry. There are people like that in every organization. Doesn't matter if you're in business, if you're in sports. There's somebody in your organization that wants to win, and they'll make it uncomfortable for everybody who's not bringing it. And to hear how he talked and dealt with his teammates, it's a certain type of teammate that can play with a guy like that. So for me, that was what I like to see about that side of Michael Jordan.
A lot of banter on Twitter tonight about that, especially when it comes to pettiness. Maybe somebody sneezed the wrong way during a free throw. Yeah, that guy right there, that kind of thing. Paige, do you agree with Corey? What do you think of the level of, I'm going to say pettiness because I can't think of another word, even though
the guy had a list.
He had a list. How long was this man's list?
Listen, listen. I think there's a certain level of competitiveness, right, that exists if you play professional sports, and then there's a certain level of competitiveness that exists when you're a leader on one of those teams, and then there's Michael, and I think that's why this documentary for me was so important. I was born in '89, so I don't remember everything like Corey does, but I remember like 97, 98 was like prime growing up. Like for me, like I was just becoming a sports fan. So for me, hearing my younger cousins talk to me about LeBron all the time, this was the mental aspect that Jordan had that nobody else has, is what I wanted them to see. And I think the documentary did such a good job of showing that although it could come across as whatever you want to call it, pettiness, overly competitive, he's a jerk, whatever, guess what? They all reap the benefits. And I'm quite sure that if you talk to Steve Kerr or any of these guys, they would take the punch in the face or the talking smack over here to get all the rings, because they don't care. At the end of the day, they all got paid more. They got appearances. They got the notoriety. They got the fame. None of that happens without Michael. So you reap all the benefits because of who he was and what they were along for the ride for. And I think that's what I wanted kind of everybody to see, because if you talk to anybody in the NBA, they all have a Michael story, right? Like Gary Payton has a Michael story, and Reggie, like they all have this, I was talking smack to Michael and then he dropped 50 on me. Like everybody has that story. And that's what I was trying to explain to my younger cousins, is like, I'm not talking about Joe Schmoes. I'm talking about Reggie Miller and Gary Payton. These are the dudes he was punking on, not average guys, Hall of Famers. Those are the guys that he was punking on. And that's what I wanted people to understand. And they did a great job.
Well, I thought the one stat that was very interesting, because when it goes to commercial break, it does like the trivia question. I had no idea how many 60-win teams Michael Jordan eliminated from the playoffs.
I said 8 right off the bat, and it was 7, which is, damn, that's pretty remarkable.
That is. I mean, but again, people talk about Michael Jordan and the legacy from the 90s. They make it seem like it was easy for him along the way in the playoffs, where in the East at that time, it wasn't a walk in the park.
But, I mean, Jabari, you could speak to this. The Lakers with the Shaq and Kobe era, and how just a mess it was off the court. But on the court, it worked like butter, right? It was smooth. And I think that was the mirage that the Bulls gave the public, is this is easy, or this, we have the best player on the planet. And at the time the Lakers did with Shaq and Kobe later on. Jabari, what was your perspective on all this, and what was your highlight of the entire doc?
So like both Paige and Corey, I appreciated that they show all the petty stuff. I love all that stuff. You know what I mean? I love the stories. I love them explaining some of the folklore that we've always kind of heard about, or a little bit about. But for me, it was more of the humanizing, aspect of them. The fact that they showed just how significant his relationship was with his father. The fact that they explained what that scene actually meant when he was on the ground after that, after they finally won, when he came back, and you know what I mean? Like we've all seen that. We've all seen that picture plenty of times. We may have even seen the video. And even though I lived through it, and obviously Corey lived through it, and I'm pretty sure you did as well. So placing context on that moment, it just means the most. So I love all of it. It's one of the greatest sports documentaries that I've ever seen. For me, it's OJ Made in America and this, right there. It's one of those things that I'll definitely go back and watch, and I can absolutely see myself going like, oh, I missed that the first time, or I didn't quite recognize what was going on, what was going on along the way. So yeah, it's art.
So
Corey, go ahead, Corey. I know I see you just itching. Go ahead.
It was just something else that I wanted to point out, and on a personal level, the level of grown man stuff that was going on in this documentary. Like,
yes, sir.
I hate you, but then I'm gonna find you in the tunnel after the game and be like, tell your wife I said hello. Yeah. Like, you're throwing elbows, you're talking trash. We're going at it like warriors, and then the fact that these guys were in the middle of the finals and they're playing golf with each other the day before the game. I mean, today's NBA, these guys make a comment about somebody's pregame outfit and it's a Twitter beef, and they drama. And it's like, no, they're out here saying that my gambling got my father killed, and I got to go play with that. And so the level of maturity when Karl Malone comes on the bus to dap you up, that doesn't happen anymore in sports. A lot of guys are sensitive. They can't separate the battle from real life. Yeah. And to see in the 90s how, they went to war, but they respected each other as men and were civil. Larry Bird getting knocked out of the playoffs in a game 7, finds Jordan. And it's like they're homies. And I'm like, that doesn't happen anymore.
I don't know if that quote was really homie-ish.
Well,
that was Mike's version of homie. That's what Mike did.
That's true.
You see how Mike talks about his kids?
F them kids.
Man, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of moments. Dennis Rodman. Okay, we got to talk about Dennis, man. I thought we were done with Dennis in episodes 3 and 4, but then my man came back with a vengeance, going to WCW, and was it Tuesday Night Nitro or something like that? And,
yes.
My goodness, somebody had put on Twitter, I think Rob Perez said, my man went from a game to a wrestling event, came back, won another game, and then went out with Carmen Electra. Nobody's ever going to have a hot streak like that ever again. I mean, Dennis Rodman, in one word, what was your biggest takeaway from Dennis Rodman? We'll start with you, Jabari.
Enigma. Like, there's no single word that you can describe or explain Dennis Rodman with.
For sure. How about you, Corey?
I mean, he wasn't a basketball player. He was just this dude that was good at basketball. Because if you looked at the way he set up his life, it was always balanced. It's like, I'm going to party till 4 a.m. Then I'm going to come shut down Karl Malone. Then I'm going to go do this. Then I'm going to come back and defend this guy and get 17, 20 rebounds and a half. Like, he just happened to be a basketball player. But at the end of the day, when I saw him leave and do the little WWF thing, I'm thinking, he's a guy who puts pressure on himself to perform. Do you know what people were going to say if you play a bad game following something like that? So here's a guy who says, this is what I do. I'm going to go. And yes, that's something he did last second. He goes, he does it, and then he shows up and defends Karl Malone in the NBA Finals.
And Michael Jordan said it, I believe it was in episode 3 when they talked about Dennis Rodman's 48-hour vacation in Las Vegas that ended up being a little bit longer than 48 hours. And he gets him out of bed. But, they were always worried, is the partying, is all of the off the court things, is that going to affect his game? And Michael Jordan realized when they did the Indian drills, when they were running around the court for all this time, and it took them a long time just to keep up with Dennis Rodman. That's when Michael Jordan realized, Dennis Rodman, he's going to be a wild guy off the court, but he's always going to be on point on the court. And that's what made him so great.
What's so funny is, and I'll get to you in a second, Paige, but the correlation between Michael Jordan and Gary Payton, and then you go from Rodman and Malone, and I just want to put it in perspective. Everybody, Gary Payton was sitting there talking about how, had I matched up with Michael a little bit earlier in the series, maybe it would have been different and blah, 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 because I was being physical with him and blah, blah, blah. That's the difference between Michael Jordan and Karl Malone, because Dennis was giving him the same business, and Karl was still effective, but he wasn't effective enough to beat the greatest player of all time. And that's what I thought when that microcosm kind of showed itself. I was like, huh. And then, I mean, we got to talk about the cutaways, the Michael Jordan cutaways. I love when Michael Jordan is watching somebody else talk shit. I'm sorry. And then he just laughs. He just goes crazy. Paige, what was your favorite?
That was those were my highlights. Like, as far as I stole Corey's, or I just went off of Corey's highlight, because that was the competitiveness was my favorite part. But as far as like the non-basketball related parts of this, there is nothing better. Like, I never thought the crying Jordan meme would go away, but it might actually be retired, because there are so many memes now that have been made of Michael laughing and making fun of people. And I think that when I think of the maniacal, crazy version of Jordan, I think of him in that moment where Gary Payton is trying to tell us that he actually could have shut down Michael for a 7-game series. And Michael's reaction was exactly what I wanted it to be and more. It was just, there's like 8 different screenshots from that 2-second moment that are fantastic, right? I mean, it's just him just absolutely making a mockery of Gary Payton on national television on a huge documentary that was just over the top for me. So all those moments, but the painful one, as I'm sure Corey can probably feel this as well as being a Bulls guy, watching Michael react to Jerry Reinsdorf talking was like vomit inducing for me, because I'm feeling exactly what Michael's feeling, right? I'm going, you're so full of it,
Corey,
Reinsdorf.
man, squirming over there in the chair.
So full of it. And I just losing my mind on the couch, just so pissed off. So that was the high to the low, like, great moment, but also probably the most like knife moment for me was that moment.
So question for Paige and Corey, the Chicago wins. When you heard Reinsdorf's comments, did you realize, man, maybe Jerry Krause wasn't a bad guy after all?
No. I mean, Krause was that, and see, you're not an 80s kid.
All right, we're about to get into it now. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
the feeling in my area, Krause was that punk ass high school principal in like every 80s teen movie. The one that wouldn't let nobody have any fun, like the 80s movie where the principal's a jerk. That's how Jerry Krause is looked at in Chicago. Like, he's necessary because he's the principal, but he won't let us do it our way. He's just.
But Reinsdorf is the district superintendent. He can squash that.
For sure.
Profile. Reinsdorf wasn't doing quotes all the time. It was Krause in the paper doing quotes and constantly making statements. Reinsdorf, everybody knew he ran the show, but he kept a better profile. And when
kept Scottie Pippen on a 7-year deal for $18 million and talking about,
dude, that's Scotty's agent's got to have a conversation.
Come
bro.
on,
like,
man.
you can't be signing that contract.
I'm with you,
bad.
Paige.
That's so bad.
When you hear Scottie Pippen say out of his own mouth that I didn't bet on myself, he was a poor kid from Arkansas. There was more money than he ever saw in life. He figured longevity, taking care of the family. Who knew he'd be an NBA megastar? So he didn't bet on himself, where, Jordan started signing 1-year deals. I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. Pip took the money. And in the grown man world, you can't just rewrite a contract unless you're Ezekiel Elliott. You just can't rewrite a contract because you feel like it.
That hurts the soul, Corey. That hurt the soul right there, Dallas Cowboys fan.
And you're talking about two very different Jerrys, because Jerry Reinsdorf does not write checks like Jerry Jones does. Like, you're talking about two completely different scenarios. Like, could not be more opposite on the spectrums there.
Jabari,
the cheapest dude in the world. So.
Jabari, I know you had something you wanted to say there for a second.
He's itching.
So to Justin's point, like, when I first started watching Doc, I thought, man, Jerry Krause isn't that bad. Why were they so mean to him? Because keep in mind, I'm watching it from the outside looking in. I didn't see all of these quotes. I didn't see all of his little skirmishes and all of that stuff. So as I'm watching the Doc, I obviously I knew they didn't get along, and I knew that there was something up with Pippen, but had no idea about all of the background. So when they start showing all of the stuff, I'm like, well, my man did put together this team, and he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy. But the longer we went, I was like, yeah, you know what? Jerry Krause is I did not say it, but Jerry Krause is exactly what they all say he is. And I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead, or anything like that. But I get why folks from Chicago natives, especially folks that were in that organization, might not have seen eye to eye with him.
For sure. No, I totally get that. We have a lot of people commenting on Facebook right now. Scotty's agent told him not to sign it, but he signed it anyway, like you said. And well, we move on. And now, for every high, we have a low. Paige just mentioned her low. Corey, what was your ultimate low in this series?
You know, the low for me was when he lost his father. I mean, random violence. You're beyond an icon. And real life hits you in a way like that. And it's not that he just had to show up. He had to show up, be a star, and show up and be an icon, and show up and be a leader, and be the face of the NBA. A young man and anyone losing a parent is just crushing. But he had a certain level he had to return to mentally. And I just felt really bad for him at that point. I said, I don't know how many people could show up back to work a regular 9 to 5. Let alone compete at that level. So that for me was very challenging. And I think it gets glossed over in the whole Jordan story. It's like people take time off to grieve. People take a year. People do things. People change dramatically when you have losses like that. Yeah. But the world demanded so much of Michael Jordan. He was still able to deliver. I mean, lots of people lose parents, but just for him to be that mentally tough, I thought that was really impressive.
Saul, to Corey's point quickly, I think just from an embarrassment standpoint, I was embarrassed watching how the media handled that time frame. I think I wanted to speak on that because I can't imagine how sad it would be to lose a parent in that way in general, but then to have all the allegations and speculation and the reporting that was done around that, because I was young, I don't remember it. I don't remember seeing any of it. I was just that was the true low point, just from like a sadness perspective, sitting there going, I think something that happens in sports so often from fans and media is everyone forgets that you're talking about human beings when you're talking about athletes. And they think that this is just, you have this shell that you're not going to feel these emotions. And I think this was a good reminder that, you're talking about somebody who loved someone, right? And his love for his father was so strong that obviously, like you spoke about that moment where you see him and you hear him grieving after he wins that championship, and the gravity of that moment, I think was so big. And it was hopefully important for people to hear that it's just a reminder you're talking about human beings, right? And I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle when we're talking about athletes.
Well,
Justin, Justin Jabari, real quick. You guys are you guys used to be in the media. Jabari used to work for USA Today. Justin, you still are. The level of access that was given to not only this doc crew, but also the relationships that, Jordan even had with some of the media, walking down the hallway, like that would never happen today. It doesn't happen today. What'd you think about the access and the behind the scenes stuff that, if we could get that kind of stuff today, that'd be amazing.
Was Ahmad Rashad a reporter, or was he just like Michael Jordan's best friend?
He was his media hype man, is what he was.
Okay, but insane access, right? But even the other access, like the camera guys and the way Michael Jordan interacted with them, you wouldn't see anything like that today. I don't know. What do you guys think,
Jabari?
Yeah, it would be rare. You'd have to be a luminary of that type of, of that size. Like, for instance, Kobe did it, the last couple of years that he was in LA. And I'm very interested in seeing what that eventual documentary looks like. But yeah, you're right. You're simply not going to see that. To your Ahmad Rashad point, Corey, I'm sure you remember this. Saul, you should also as well. Do you remember after the games when he would interview Mike and he would lead off with sheer will? Come on, man. You know that was whack. You know that was whack when he did. Every single time you'd be like looking into the camera, all mystified. The wackest.
Ahmad Rashad was straight trash, bro. He was trash. He was Jordan's homeboy. They played cards. They were family friends. And word was the only reason he got the gig at NBC was Mike said, "This is the only guy I will give a post game to." Point blank. And if you go back and look at it, the majority of his interviews are with Ahmad Rashad. So like, this is my guy. I'm going to get my guy a job with a major network by simply saying he's the only guy I'm talking to post game. And then
That's some goat power. That's
the,
some goat power, Corey.
the softball questions were horrible. He was on his jock from the beginning to the end. Now, keep in mind, Ahmad Rashad's wife is Claire Huxtable.
Oh yeah. Oh
You see what
yeah.
I'm saying? So the celebrityism is, you look at Justin, you're learning. See?
I'm learning.
This is that 100 level.
You didn't know that?
You talk about. No. You got to learn the 360. So
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I agree with you 100%, Jabari.
Just like the documentary, he's taking you from the known to the unknown, baby. Here we go.
Ahmad was not the best.
Justin, remind me to send you a picture after this.
Okay. I love
Oh
it.
my goodness, Justin, you were about
Love
to
it.
ask something before I interrupted you.
No, I was saying, going back to Paige's point about how it was a low point in journalism. That was a quote that was used in the documentary at that time. I was just so bothered by it because these were columnists creating these stories. They were linking it to MJ's gambling without any hardcore evidence. And essentially in these stories, they were putting all of the blame on Michael Jordan. And like Paige said, I can't imagine being a person like Michael Jordan at that point in your career. You lose the most important male figure in your life, and everybody's blaming you for it.
Can you guys see these comments on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right.
But-
just making sure. That's
But
funny.
yeah, it's just, there's one thing if you're a columnist and you're coming up with an opinion based on the facts that you already have. That's your job as a columnist. It is not your job as a columnist to just come up with these crazy conspiracy theories because that's what you think people are going to read. And you know what's crazy is this was during a time where clickbait wasn't even an expression.
Yeah.
I think that's why I thought it was so strange, is because this wasn't like the Twitter world. This wasn't like NBA Twitter going off on some rant, right? Like this was like legitimate columnists that were going off of absolutely nothing. And I think that's why it was more embarrassing. And probably to you guys' point, like the access that happens and used to happen, like the reason that doesn't happen anymore is because athletes don't trust the media. Like that's the reason why. Like there has to be a certain level of trust that exists with a relationship and partnership.
I also think a lot of athletes blur the lines between social media and media as a general.
Very true. Very true.
I mean? So,
everyone does, I think, for the most part. But I think that's why, and a degree of, as my father would say, everybody's soft now, right? That gets thrown around quite often as well. So I think there's, to that degree, I think,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I think part of it is there's been so many things that have happened over time. And this just proved it to me. If I was Michael Jordan and that happened, I would never talk to the media again. I'd be like, nope, I'm not talking to anybody. And I think he would have been totally justified in doing that, because if I got treated like that, that's what I would do.
But that goes back to his professionalism, like Corey mentioned earlier, understanding like who's really telling your story right now. Yes, we can see everything that's going on the screen, but there's a lot more to it behind the scenes. And if you treat the media right, for the most part, they'll treat you right. That's what's supposed to happen. Now, obviously, things go a little haywire like they just did. But before we all disband and go somewhere else, I gotta ask, from each one of you, who was the biggest villain in this entire documentary outside of possibly Jerry Krause?
Ooh.
I'll go first. Isaiah Thomas. That's an easy one for me.
Okay.
The hatred for him is so strong. Like those were teams that we were playing before I was alive, and then when I was, an infant. And I can recall my dad sitting me down when I'm probably like right before the Utah Jazz, probably like 6 or 7, and teaching me like, I want to teach you about the team that Michael beat to get where we were. And I was like, okay, Dad, like this is going to be awesome. And so like watching all this again, I was like, man, I hate Isaiah. I hate that dude. Like I was just like, just so strong. And not even Isaiah, just like the Pistons in general, just like everything that Detroit was, and how big of a thing it was for Michael to get over that team. And then to watch that moment and see them not shake hands, and then hear Larry and all these guys talking about how they all hated the Pistons. I was like, this is awesome. Like I love the villainy of the Pistons, because it was like the Bulls hated them, but so did everybody else. And they were the bad boys to Magic hated them, and Larry hated them. And like, it was like, nobody liked the Pistons. And so I was like, oh, this is great. The hatred lives everywhere. And so I think that was, for me, the easy villain was the Pistons.
Corey?
Man, I hate, I'm from the Chicago area, so I hate to do this to Zeke, but yeah, man, I can't rock with him. Like, he got up there. He got up there with the fake crocodile. I fit the criteria to make the no, fam. You didn't. Like you up there talking about I fit the criteria, but Jordan didn't like you. Bird didn't like you. You were spreading rumors about Magic. Carmel, like the whole team did not rock with you. So the story that Jordan banned you from the team. Here's the thing. When the Lakers beat the Celtics beat the Lakers, it is what it is. You guys went outside the confines of the game that Dr. Naismith created, and y'all started straight up thuggery. Y'all was actually trying to hurt people. The fouls that were just in the documentary were flagrant twos. That was part of y'all approach to basketball. Y'all brought kung fu into basketball and then walked off the court like some punks. No one liked you. So when you're building the dream team of the best athletes, everybody's got to score. You dominate the ball. So of course Stockton was the better fit for the dream team of a bunch of guys who didn't like you anyway. But now it's 2020 and you want to sit on the couch in your little blue suit talking about I fit the criteria. But no, man, miss me with that.
And you know what? I think the most
so
disrespectful thing Corey just said was Isaiah Thomas wearing fake crocodiles on TV.
Got some Stacey Adams on over there, man.
You really tried to make people feel sorry for him, and I'm like, no,
Yeah,
I remember.
Thank you.
I remember.
Yeah,
you
thank
jumped
you.
out of your own gym without shaking his hand. Y'all body slamming this dude all day long, and then when they finally beat you fair and square, despite the recovery, you can't shake the man's hand. You ain't playing on the dream team, man. Please,
Jabari.
Fake crocodiles.
I'm just here for Corey's passion, man.
I mean, for real, man.
I'm not going to crocodile tears.
No, because I mean, it's like, but we can't retell the story. Like, this is what I'm saying. If you were a worker at a company and you had all your coworkers together, and most of them are all-time greats, the guys that worked alongside Jordan, you don't know anything about basketball. You go to the company, who's the best guy at the company? And 40 all-time greats say that guy over there is the best guy we've ever worked with, against, point blank. That's why I don't think there'll ever be another documentary like this. Who can assemble 30 Hall of Famers that all say he's the best? Yeah. Isaiah didn't have that kind of pull. So I'm not trying to feel sorry for him right now. That's all.
Jabari,
they don't love you like that, see?
Exactly.
Okay, so
he's a Chicago guy.
It says a lot about Zeke that a lot of Chicago players don't even they go Mike, who's from North Carolina.
Because he's disrespectful about Michael. That's at the end of the day, we ride for you from Chicago. Like, I ride for all the dudes that are from there. Like, it's a pride thing. It's a different place. When you grow out there and you play basketball, it's just different. But nobody messes with Isaiah because of the way he talks about Mike. Like, there's certain things you can't talk about, and that's one of them. And he talks about it too negatively. So he's out. He's not involved in the Chicago circle no more. Sorry, Jabari. We're just going to turn this into a total Chicago podcast. So I feel sorry for you, man.
Jabari, who's your biggest villain, man?
No worries at all. Now I feel obligated to share a Chicago story. See, I was born in Milwaukee, even though I grew up in LA. And my people are still in Milwaukee. I went back probably like 98 or so. We went down and we played some pickup ball in Chicago. My pops will never play pickup ball again. Never play pickup ball again after that. So much respect to the ball. Much respect to the hoopers in Chicago. For me, the biggest villain is easy. Yes, Lambeer, yes, Zeke, in his little blue suit and all of that. The biggest villain is Jordan, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. He's an anti-hero in the same way as Tony Soprano, in the same way as that we've grown accustomed to loving. All of the rumors were true, not the stuff about the dad stuff, but all of the rumors were true. He was that big of a jerk. He was riding folks the way that everybody always thought he was. He was taking disrespect from everything. Saul, as we said, somebody sneezing upstairs, in the upper deck. Oh, okay, now I gotta hurt him. Now I gotta hurt him.
On my lips.
That's what makes that's what makes Mike so incredible. The fact that a guy, born in Milwaukee, grew up in Los Angeles, hated his guts, loves everything about him.
Justin?
Mike.
Oh man. I don't know how I can follow Jabari. That was just so great.
I like that.
But
Yeah, me too.
But go ahead and try. Here we go.
But let's go back to bashing the Pistons. I'm not going to go with Isaiah Thomas. I'm not going to bash his fake crocodiles, and I'm not going to bash his blue suit. I'm going to bash the guy that was in his ear the second they lost against the Chicago Bulls, and that is Bill Laimbeer. He was the one who came up with the idea of not shaking their hands. He was the one who incited, look, screw these guys. We're going to walk off the court. And I thought that was very disrespectful, especially because Michael Jordan said, if you go back and look at the film from the years prior, they beat us. We shook their hands. We lost with class. Yeah, we're going to talk shit to them on the court, and we're going to get petty, and we're going to make this thing into kind of a bloodbath. But at the end of the day, we're going to shake hands, and we're going to respect each other as opponents. And the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys, completely crossed that line. Bill Laimbeer was the guy who incited all that, so I'm going with Bill Laimbeer.
The biggest L for me in this whole series, what happened actually in the last episode with Brian Russell. I don't care what anybody says. How they try to sugarcoat, he didn't mean it like that. Well, no. If Corey knows this too. If you go into a gym and you see like some football player that somebody said cahoop, like, man, I wish you would have played because I would have busted your ass. Like that ain't really like, yeah. I'm just joking. That's real. Like you should have come out here so I can show you what's up. And the fact that they tried to, John Stockton of all people, like, well, he didn't mean it like that. No, get out of here. And then he got done up twice. And so,
well, if you're saying biggest L, I think Michael Jordan took the biggest L after a game in the hallway with the security guard with the great perm when they were throwing the quarters towards the wall, and then he beat him in quarters, and then gave him the Michael Jordan shrug.
Gave him the shrug.
That's the only person in the history of mankind that
Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. For sure. Well, hey, fellas, ladies, I appreciate your time jumping on the podcast today. Again, Jabari Davis, a longtime NBA writer, and on the Dunks and Discourse podcast, Corey Williams from ESPN, and then Paige Dimakos. Thank you for joining us from the Draft Network. So thank you guys. Appreciate the roundtable, and we will see you next time. So there we go. And Justin, man, that was a nice way to wrap up the whole thing. It was very interesting.
A lot of different perspectives, Saul, and I'm really glad we were able to get people who grew up in Chicago during that era, because we hear about the Chicago Bulls and what it means to people. Saul, you grew up in Arizona. Michael Jordan means a whole lot to you because that was a player you looked up to. To hear Paige and Corey, two people who lived through it in Chicago, I thought that was great. And to hear Jabari also live through it as someone who hated Michael Jordan. Yeah, it was a special podcast. I'm glad we got everybody
for sure. And they're still hanging on, and we're gonna get to them after we close shop here. But Justin, tell people one more time where they can find us.
Total BS Podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Also be sure to subscribe to Total BS Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And once again, we will have another podcast for you dropping on Wednesday. And so stay tuned for that. Ashley Shahamadi from Fox Sports South. She covers the Hornets, and she is going to give us her thoughts on wrapping up this Last Chance documentary as well. So that'll be on Wednesday. But in the meantime, we'll see you when we see you. Peace.
Your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just part of the program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You're not whack, you just sound whack rapping after us. Yo, your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just a part of this program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You not whack, you just sound whack rapping after us.